guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. What does it take to be in the top 1% in America? Those top 1%ers live like no one else. They are the ultra high net worth individuals. And to be a 1%er, you need a combination of a really high net worth and a really high annual income. In order to gain entry into the top 1%, you need a net worth of at least $11.1 million and an annual income of at least $760,000. Compare that to the typical American family who has a median net worth of $120,000 or even an average net worth of $746,000. What about the income? The median income for an individual in the US is just $31,000. For a family, it bumps up to $68,000. And you can see that these 1%ers are definitely in a league of their own. Turns out 1.4 million people make up the top 1%. And those individuals are spread out over a vast number of industries. Think medical professionals, entrepreneurs, executives, and yes, those who inherit their wealth. However, surprisingly, only 41% of people in this top 1% category receive any inheritance at all. I mean, that's higher than the typical American, in which only 20% of Americans report receiving any inheritance at all, but still, 41%? That seemed a bit low to me. That suggests that even when it comes to the ultra wealthy, the vast majority of them are self-made, which is absolutely phenomenal. What do you guys think? Is that number higher or lower than you expected? And while the top 1% may be a fairly small group, they control a great deal of our nation's wealth. As a matter of fact, this 1% of people hold over 42% of the entire country's wealth, coming in at roughly $34 trillion. The next 4% controls 27% of the country's wealth. So that means the top 5% alone controls 69% of our nation's total wealth. That is an enormous amount. The next 5% control 11%. The next 10% after that, they control 12% of the country's wealth. And finally, the bottom 80% of our country, that's 263 million people, they control just 7% of the nation's wealth. And what about income? Because to these ultra high net worth individuals, income is just as important as net worth. As a nation, the US annual income in 2020 was $19.7 trillion. Now, of course, we're only talking about taxable income here because if it's not being reported to the government, the National Bureau of Labor and Statistics can't report on it either. With that being said, the top 1% lay claim to roughly 21% of this total income, or roughly $4 trillion. The remaining 79% is divided up among the other 99% of the country's constituents. So much like the chart on net worth, this chart is very top heavy. So no doubt it takes a lot to be in the top 1%. But we all know income looks very different based on your life circumstances. One of the biggest factors is where you call home. And of course, these 1%ers likely have more than one home, but let's dive a little deeper and see what it would take to be in the 1% of each state based on your earnings. As you can see, it takes anywhere from $300,000 to over $800,000 in order to gain entry into the top 1% for any given state. For the vast majority of states, you are going to need an income of at least $400,000 to $500,000 annually in order to rightfully call yourself a 1% income earner of your state. A minimum income of at least $300,000 is needed to hit the top 1% for any individual state. But bear in mind that being in the top 1% of any single state is not the same as being in the overall top 1% of the nation. But of course, it can still buy you a mighty nice life in your state, and likely any other state as well. The state with the lowest income necessary to get into the top 1% is West Virginia. The income needed is $319,000 a year. The highest is Connecticut. The annual income necessary to get into the top 1% in Connecticut is $827,000. Now, these incomes are reflective of the cost of living in these states. For instance, the typical home in West Virginia is valued at roughly $132,000, whereas the typical home in Connecticut is valued at roughly $325,000. So different states have different costs of living. Now, before we proceed any further, let's acknowledge the elephant in the room. Yes, there is an obvious wage gap in this nation, but that is not something we are really going to talk about in this video. This video is meant to be lighthearted, entertaining, and fun. However, along that same line of thinking, it is worth pointing out that the income and the wealth of these top 1%ers is growing exponentially faster than it is for the typical American. Between the 30-year period from 1979 to 2019, the income for the top 1%ers grew by 160%. Compare that to the bottom 90% of Americans who saw average wage growth of just 26% during this same time period. So there is truth to the statement, the rich get richer. Once you have money, it is easier to grow it and compound your wealth. Surprisingly, much of this explosion in wage growth is actually attributed to access and exposure to the stock market. Consider Elon Musk. He is worth a reported $191 billion. But guess what his salary is on any given year? $23,000. That's it. So how did he make all his money? Well, the sale of PayPal certainly garnered him a nice chunk of change, but also he is paid in stock, so equity in his company, Tesla. As the stock value increases, so does his pay. That's how he made $11 billion last year. On a side note, Musk has never actually claimed his salary of $23,000. Seems like that $11 billion was sufficient. Taking advantage of the stock market is a great way to grow your wealth exponentially. It's unlikely that if you're relying on salary alone that you will ever actually be able to build true wealth. Now, of course, it does help that these top 1%ers are often owners of wildly successful companies that go public and garner them a great deal of wealth based on stock options and stock ownerships. However, I do want to point out that the stock market is a great path to wealth, no matter how much or how little you have. That's just my little PSA for us average folks here. Now, I do want to point out, while the wealthiest 1% are often portrayed as greedy Wall Street fat cats, that's traditionally not the case. As a whole, they are quite the charitable bunch. In any given year, they are responsible for 1/3 of total charitable contributions. And that's quite a hefty sum, being that last year alone, $450 billion was contributed to charities. So hopefully that money is being put to good use and helping a lot of people. So maybe you're looking at these numbers and thinking to yourself, dang, I'll never be in the top 1%. Or maybe you look at them and you think, psh, top 1%, heck, I'm gonna be in the top 0.01%. And if that's you, phenomenal. I love people who have lofty, ambitious goals. Well, here's the annual income you would need to be in the top 0.1%, the top 1%, the top 5%, and even the top 10%. What about net worth? The top 10%, they have a threshold net worth of $1.2 million. The top 5%, you have to have at least $2.6 million. For that top 1%, as we said, it's $11.1 million. And what about that top 0.1%? That is $43 million. So maybe you're not aiming for the top 1%, but maybe you're aiming to be in the top 5% or even the top 10%. Getting into the top 10% is an extraordinary feat all its own. But to go from the top 10% to the top 1%, you would need a 10-fold increase on your net worth. You would need a 5-fold increase on your annual income. Is it possible? Well, I suppose that depends on you, your ambitions, and your capabilities. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below about the ultra wealthy. I love to hear what you guys have to say. That's gonna do it for me today, guys. I post new videos every single week, so if you got anything at all out of this one, please hit like on your way out. If you are new here, please consider subscribing. And as always, if you know of anyone who might enjoy this style of video, please consider sharing. I appreciate it so much. With that said, I'll see you guys next week. Have a good one. Bye.